Most people believe their biggest enemy is stress, failure, rejection, or toxic people. But what if I told you the real thing destroying your life is something far more invisible? Something happening inside you every single day without your awareness, because the greatest damage in your life has never come from what happened to you. It came from the way you reacted to it. Think about it carefully. One message ruins your mood. One opinion changes your confidence. One moment of rejection makes you question your worth. Someone ignores you, and suddenly your mind creates stories that were never even real. And the terrifying part is this happens so fast. You think it is normal, but it is not normal to lose control of your peace every time life becomes uncomfortable. Most people are not living consciously. They are living emotionally hijacked, programmed by old wounds, hidden insecurities, childhood conditioning, and impulses they never stopped to understand. They call it personality. They call it just who I am. But what if your reactions are not your identity? What if they are evidence that someone else still controls your inner world? Because the moment another person can control your emotions, they control your mind. And if you do not learn how to pause, how to observe yourself, how to respond instead of react, you will spend your entire life giving your power away without even noticing it. In this video, you are going to discover why emotionally intelligent people move differently, why calmness is the highest form of power, and how mastering your reactions can completely transform your relationships, your confidence, your decisions, and your future. Because once you understand this, you will never see your emotions or yourself the same way again. There is something deeply uncomfortable about realizing that many of our emotions are not actually chosen in the moment. They are rehearsed, automatic, conditioned responses that have been repeated so many times they begin to feel like identity. Someone says something dismissive, and instantly your body tightens. Someone criticizes you, and your tone changes before your mind even catches up. Someone ignores your message, and suddenly your entire mood collapses. And because it happens so fast, you assume it must be true. But speed does not make something true, it only makes it familiar. Most people spend their entire lives reacting, never questioning why they react the way they do. They think their anger is caused by the person in front of them. They think their jealousy is caused by another person's success. They think their emotional explosions are justified because something painful happened. But if you pay attention carefully, you begin to notice something profound. The event itself is rarely the real trigger. The event simply touches an emotional bruise that already existed long before that moment arrived. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation and interpret it completely differently. One person hears criticism and uses it to grow. Another hears criticism and experiences humiliation. One person faces rejection and becomes reflective. Another becomes destructive. The external event is identical, but the internal meaning is completely different. And that meaning is shaped by memory, insecurity, fear, and emotional conditioning accumulated over years. The human mind is constantly searching for emotional certainty. It wants to protect you from pain, embarrassment, abandonment, and shame. So the moment something threatens your identity, your nervous system reacts before your conscious mind has time to evaluate reality. That reaction can look like anger, defensiveness, withdrawal, sarcasm, control, silence, or even people-pleasing. And because these responses have protected you in the past, you continue using them even when they are destroying your present. That is the tragedy of unconscious reactions. They were once survival strategies, but over time they become prisons. A person who learned as a child that love could disappear suddenly may panic when someone becomes distant. A person who constantly felt judged may become aggressive the moment they feel criticized. Someone who grew up emotionally unseen may interrupt constantly, desperate to prove their value before they are ignored again. These reactions are not random. They are deeply organized emotional patterns, and most people never examine them because reacting feels easier than reflecting. But here is the cost of living reactively. You slowly lose ownership over yourself. When another person can instantly determine your emotional state, they begin controlling the quality of your inner life. One comment ruins your day. One rejection destroys your confidence. One disagreement changes your identity. That means your emotional stability is no longer internal. It is outsourced to the behavior of other people. And this is where suffering quietly begins, because the world is unpredictable. People are inconsistent. They disappoint you, misunderstand you, reject you, betray you, and project their own wounds onto you. If your peace depends on everybody behaving the way you want them to behave, you will spend your entire life emotionally exhausted. This is why emotional maturity is not about suppressing feelings. It is about creating space between the feeling and the response. That space changes everything. Inside that pause, you begin to see yourself clearly. You notice how quickly your ego wants to defend itself. You notice how badly you want validation. You notice how easily fear disguises itself as anger. And for the first time, instead of becoming the emotion, you observe it. That observation is power, because when you can observe your reaction without immediately obeying it, you interrupt the pattern. And interrupting the pattern means you are no longer living automatically. You are living consciously. Most people believe strength is domination. It is not. Real strength is self-regulation. It is the ability to remain grounded while emotions pull at you from every direction. It is being able to hear criticism without collapsing, to experience disappointment without becoming bitter, to feel anger without becoming cruel. Anyone can react. That requires no awareness, no discipline, no depth. But to pause in an emotionally charged moment and choose your response consciously, that is rare. That is mastery. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is this: every reaction reveals where you have surrendered your power. Every moment of impulsive anger, desperate validation, or emotional collapse is showing you a part of yourself that still needs healing. So the next time life provokes you, do not ask, "How do I stop feeling this?" Ask something more courageous. What is this reaction trying to protect inside me? Because the moment you understand your reactions, you stop being controlled by them. And that is the moment you finally begin to own yourself. There is a misconception that emotionally disciplined people simply feel less, that they are naturally calm, naturally patient, naturally unshaken by life, but that is rarely true. The difference is not that they experience fewer emotions. The difference is that they have learned not to become servants to every emotion they experience. That distinction changes everything, because emotions are not instructions. They are information. Anger tells you something feels threatened. Fear tells you something feels uncertain. Jealousy tells you something inside you feels lacking. Sadness tells you something matters deeply to you. But somewhere along the way, people began believing that every emotion must immediately be acted upon. If they feel angry, they express it instantly. If they feel hurt, they punish someone instantly. If they feel insecure, they seek reassurance immediately. Modern culture has confused emotional expression with emotional intelligence, but they are not the same thing. Emotional intelligence is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to stay conscious while feeling deeply. And this is where real power begins, because when a person cannot regulate their emotions, they become predictable. They become vulnerable to manipulation, provocation, temptation, and chaos. Anyone can pull them out of peace because their inner state depends entirely on external circumstances. You see this everywhere. One negative comment destroys someone's confidence for an entire day. One moment of rejection makes someone question their worth. One disagreement becomes a war because neither person knows how to sit with discomfort without exploding. People often think conflict destroys relationships. It does not. Lack of emotional regulation destroys relationships. The inability to tolerate frustration, disappointment, silence, or vulnerability is what slowly erodes connection. And what makes this even more dangerous is that many people mistake reactivity for authenticity. They say, "I'm just being honest," when in reality they are simply discharging unmanaged emotion onto other people. Honesty without self-awareness becomes emotional aggression. There is nothing powerful about losing control of yourself. In fact, the loudest emotional reactions are often expressions of powerlessness, not strength. When someone must scream to feel heard, dominate to feel secure, or attack to avoid feeling exposed, they are revealing how fragile their inner world actually is. A calm person is not calm because life is easy for them. They are calm because they understand that not every emotion deserves immediate permission to speak. That requires discipline, and discipline is deeply misunderstood. Most people associate discipline with productivity, routines, or achievement. But the highest form of discipline is emotional discipline. It is the ability to remain steady while your mind urges you toward chaos. To pause before sending the message you will regret. To breathe before turning pain into cruelty. To stay present when your instinct is to escape. To listen without immediately defending yourself. To tolerate silence without desperately filling it. That is maturity, because emotionally reactive people are constantly trying to escape discomfort, but emotionally intelligent people understand something profound. Discomfort is not danger. Sometimes your discomfort is simply growth happening in real time. The problem is that the nervous system does not always know the difference between being unsafe and being emotionally challenged. So the body reacts as if every criticism is humiliation, every disagreement is abandonment, every uncertainty is catastrophe. And if you never learn to regulate yourself, you spend your life fighting emotional fires that do not actually exist. This is why inner stability becomes such a rare form of power. A person who can stay grounded during uncertainty becomes trustworthy. A person who can remain calm under pressure becomes influential. A person who can experience emotion without becoming consumed by it becomes dangerous in the best possible way. Because they are no longer controlled by impulse, and impulse has destroyed more lives than failure ever will. Most regrets are not born from careful thought. They are born from temporary emotional states that people treated as permanent truths. A moment of anger ruins a relationship. A moment of insecurity destroys an opportunity. A moment of pride prevents reconciliation. Human beings often make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. That is why the pause matters so much. The pause interrupts the emotional momentum. It gives wisdom time to enter the room, and wisdom rarely arrives in emotionally flooded moments. Wisdom arrives when the nervous system slows down enough for clarity to return. This does not mean becoming cold or detached. Emotional discipline is not emotional numbness. In fact, emotionally disciplined people often feel more deeply than others. But they are not drowning in their feelings. They can hold emotion without surrendering their identity to it. And perhaps this is one of the greatest forms of freedom available to a human being: to feel everything without being ruled by anything. Imagine how different your life becomes when your peace is no longer controlled by someone else's mood, opinion, approval, or behavior. Imagine the strength required to stay rooted in yourself, while the world constantly tries to pull reactions out of you. That is not weakness, that is mastery, because the person who controls their emotions does not just change their behavior. They change the entire direction of their life, and the moment you stop asking your emotions to lead you blindly, you finally become strong enough to lead yourself. The most transformative moments in life rarely begin with confidence. They begin with awareness, with an uncomfortable realization that the patterns you keep blaming on other people are patterns you carry within yourself. And this is difficult for most people, because the human ego would rather protect its identity than confront its contradictions. It is much easier to say, "People always disappoint me," than to ask, "Why do I keep choosing people who confirm my deepest fears?" It is easier to say, "Nobody understands me," than to admit you have spent years hiding your true emotions behind performance, defensiveness, or control. Self-awareness is painful because it removes the illusion that your suffering is entirely caused by the outside world. And yet, this is precisely where freedom begins, because the moment you become aware of your emotional patterns, you stop being unconsciously ruled by them. You begin noticing the invisible scripts running your life. You begin to recognize that certain reactions are not random at all. They are rehearsed emotional habits shaped by years of unresolved experiences. A person who fears abandonment may constantly seek reassurance, but call it love. A person terrified of vulnerability may emotionally withdraw, but call it independence. A person who cannot tolerate failure may become controlling, perfectionistic, or critical without realizing their behavior is rooted in fear, not strength. Most people are not reacting to the present moment. They are reacting to accumulated emotional memory. And until those memories become conscious, they quietly shape every relationship, every decision, and every conflict. This is why self-awareness requires radical honesty, not the kind of honesty where you expose other people's flaws, but the kind where you sit quietly with yourself and ask difficult questions. Why does rejection destabilize me so deeply? Why do I become defensive when someone gives me feedback? Why do I need constant validation to feel valuable? Why does silence make me uncomfortable? Why do I chase people who cannot fully love me? These questions are uncomfortable because they force you to encounter parts of yourself you have spent years avoiding. But avoidance never heals anything. What you avoid does not disappear, it waits, and eventually it expresses itself through your reactions, your relationships, your anxieties, and your choices. This is why many people repeat the same emotional experiences with different faces. Different relationship, same insecurity. Different argument, same wound. Different environment, same emotional chaos. The external details change, but the internal pattern remains untouched. And people often mistake awareness for weakness. They think acknowledging insecurity, fear, jealousy, or emotional wounds somehow diminishes them. In reality, the opposite is true. The people who refuse self-examination are usually the ones most controlled by their unconscious patterns. Because what remains unconscious controls you from the shadows. A person unaware of their insecurity may become arrogant. A person unaware of their fear may become aggressive. A person unaware of their loneliness may become addicted to attention. A person unaware of their pain may inflict pain on everyone around them. Self-awareness interrupts this cycle. It allows you to pause long enough to recognize that your emotional reaction may not actually reflect objective reality. Sometimes what you call intuition is unresolved fear. Sometimes what you call passion is anxiety. Sometimes what you call love is attachment rooted in emptiness. And this is where emotional growth becomes deeply humbling, because you realize that healing is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming conscious, conscious of your triggers, conscious of your defenses, conscious of the stories you automatically tell yourself. The story that says, "I'm not enough." The story that says, "People always leave." The story that says, "I must prove my worth to deserve love." The story that says vulnerability is dangerous. Human beings do not merely react to reality. They react to the meaning they assign to reality, and those meanings are often inherited from old pain. That is why transformation is not achieved by forcing yourself to think positive. Transformation happens when you become curious about yourself instead of judgmental toward yourself. Curiosity changes everything. Instead of saying, "Why am I like this?" with shame, you begin asking, "Where did this pattern begin?" Instead of condemning your emotions, you start listening to them intelligently. You realize that every reaction contains information. Every trigger points towards something unresolved, asking to be understood. And once you understand it, you gain choice. Choice is the foundation of freedom. Without awareness, you live automatically. You repeat patterns without realizing you are repeating them. But awareness creates a gap between stimulus and behavior. In that gap, you can decide whether you want to continue living from old wounds or begin creating new ways of being. This is why self-awareness is one of the most powerful forms of transformation available to a human being. It changes not only how you see yourself, but how you see everyone around you. You become less reactive, less judgmental, less desperate to control people. Because you recognize that everyone is carrying invisible emotional histories they are trying to survive. And perhaps maturity is simply this: learning to take responsibility for the energy you bring into the world instead of blaming the world for everything you feel. Because the moment you become aware of your patterns, you stop being imprisoned by them. And the moment you stop running from yourself, you finally become capable of changing yourself.